post. So I might think, okay, this lesson I'm going to ask these questions. But as I begin the lesson, I realize that now, I'm too far ahead, or maybe they're not grasping something from this simple idea of body control and timing and movement composition. And they still haven't grasped that. Maybe one grade 5 class has grasped it. Maybe my other grade 5 class hasn't grasped it. So now suddenly we're teaching two parallel grade 5 classes in movement composition. One class is going one way, one class is going the other way, because one class still hasn't really grasped it. So now I need to start working on additional questions. So, additional questions to get them tuned into, for example, body control and good timing, whereas the other class already has it. So now we're pressing forward into looking at other elements of movement composition. So I think that what I do with my questions is always post them and always post the answers. So now I use the example of the one grade 5 class. So we're working on answering these questions. I write their answers down. Now another grade 5 class, or even a grade 3-4 class in the movement composition room. If the situation arises that, it's good timing and body control, well, I can say, look, I had this discussion with grade 5. Look at the ideas that they came up with. Do you agree? So I think one of the things I'm striving to do with my questions as well is, that research and evidence shows that 45% of the questions we ask are procedural questions. So it's like, do you have your pencils ready? Are you sure you understand what you need to do in this exercise? Those types of questions are very procedural, yeah? And the idea is you want to move more towards generative questions, which is questions that both teacher and students don't know the answer to. So, and then by asking questions such as that, you're building that sense of community, like we're all in it together, let's figure out the answer. So I try hard to ask questions that I really don't know the answer to. Like I'm asking this question, what would happen if we took a Kung Fu Panda fight sequence and tried to recreate it? What types of elements can we draw from gymnastics into it? Although I have an idea, I don't know what they're going to come up with. So together, we're going to come up with the answers. So it's trying to ask questions that are more generative and facilitative, more reflective questions rather than procedural. So I'm trying really, really hard to get away from the procedural and to move on to deeper questions. Yeah. If that makes sense. Sorry, I hope I'm not really
No. And I think then from that, one of the things that we discussed just before we came on the hangout was in terms of the question, how the lesson structure, like how much time would you set aside to ask these questions and then bring it back all together at the end? We were saying that, well, for me personally, I've got a 45-minute lesson, and one of the biggest challenges I've got at the moment is getting this meaningful questioning and then getting the time to actually document it and make sure the kids are not, it's not taken away from the practical element of the lesson for them as well. And I think a few of us were kind of sharing that, that opinion.
Yeah, that's an important one, but I think that there's absolute pedagogical justification for stopping the class, even for a greater length of time. If you are trying to get across a big concept or a big idea, then we're in a new era of teaching and learning, and developing critical thinkers that transcends our own subject area, I think you can slow the class down. You can take those 5-minute discussions, take 5 minutes to have these discussions that work on the big ideas. But I understand what you're saying. With the big ideas and the big questions, I'll slow the class down. The little surface questions, which are still very important, those take, they're always happening as the kids are active. I'm taking groups here and there, asking questions. But I think there is really pedagogical justification in slowing the class down to ensure that the big ideas are being grasped and you can assess whether or not they're being grasped. And I don't see any other way around it. You have to stop class at times to do that, but there's no real prescribed way that I do that. It just depends on when the need arises.
Okay. But you'd always finish with, say, about 5 minutes at the end to get that, to get the kind of main question in at the end. Is that how you would?
Or to get them to summarize the main question, to like, where are we at with the question, how are we doing? If everything's moving well, then it's just going to be, okay, we've done well, and I'll recap kind of the learning that's taking place. I don't create visuals every class, but we'll look at visuals and then I'll send them on their way. And if it's an activity that can flow, like with movement composition, one class can flow into the next because they're still working on a routine. Start a next class, we do a quick warm-up, then they move right back into their routines. So it depends on at which point of the unit that we're at. But yeah, I'll take 2 minutes, maybe 3 minutes at the most at the end of a class to slow it down and have that discussion to recap things.
Okay, cheers.
Hey guys, next time. You have a question?
No, I was just going to say something that I've come from is come from a different situation from high school and try to make it simple. Say, for example, if you've got like problem behaviour and stuff in your lessons and you've got massive classes, how do you, and you've got, say, like people not doing what you want, how do you still make it sort of PYP so they feel like they're feeling success, but you're not just being like real commandy and real like drill sergeant-y, if you understand what I'm saying?
Yeah. I think that's fortunately, being in international schools, behavior is much better than classes we would have. If I was back in Toronto or back in Ontario, Canada, where I worked when I first started my teaching career, it is a different ballgame. But I think that it goes back again to the idea of we say it and we hear it all the time, and I know that we all do it, but really getting to know what makes our students tick and getting to know them and being very consistent with classroom management, I don't think there's one answer for that, but I know that what I just try to do is and it works over time, is just if the students know, I hate to sound corny here, but if the students know that you love them, you respect them, that you respect them and want to be around them, I think 70% of the problems are taken care of at that point. Of course, you're going to have behavior problems, but I just think it's through experience with teaching. I think I love going into the classroom and seeing how teachers deal with problem behavior. Because teachers have so many different intricacies with how they manage their students. But I think that the reality is in international teaching we don't quite have the same problems that we have back home. But I think just consistency in classroom management and the way you deliver your management, allowing kids in PE, boys are not going to sit still. Boys aren't going to sit still. It's just I have to say you get girls that will sit still a lot more than boys, but I think what I allow is that outlet as I'm instructing. I don't make them sit in a circle in front of me unless we're having a discussion. I allow them to stand up. I allow them to move a little bit because they can't sit still. So you allow them to move and not put those demands on them to sit still and just listen. And that has worked well for me when I'm trying to have discussions and instruct. Provided they're listening and they're not distracting other people, then I let them move around. And if they want to stand up, I make sure they're at the back so that they're not standing up in front of anybody who's watching me. So.
Thank you very much.
I want to ask you regarding student skills in the end of the year. I don't know how much you follow you are looking for skills, but I want to ask you if you are happy with their level, because I suppose you follow the PYP system most of the time. But I want to know how important is for you this chapter, the skills, because some of the school they are still keep one international curriculum. Like in my school, we haven't USA strengths, in the school, and I must follow and PYP requirement and school requirement. You know what I mean?
Yeah. So at the end of the year, with how I assess where they're at,
Yeah.
yeah. I think that using the PSP, it's the idea of a continuum rather than putting them, assessing them exactly where they are at. They're just moving through a continuum, right? So if what we do with our reporting system is it's not just me, but it's the classroom teachers as well. We set, on our report cards, we set a goal for them, and then 2 or 3 strategies. When they meet that goal, then we move on, we give them another goal. And we still have, assessment criteria that, we have like a check system, whether or not they're meeting or exceeding or rarely meeting or sometimes meeting. But in terms of giving them a comment, we set a goal for them and the strategies. A number of my students at the end of last year that were returning did not meet that goal. So at the beginning of this year, that goal is still up and going for them to the next reporting system. So that's how we deal with it. We're more concerned with the goal, and it might be related to effort and participation. It might be related to body control, gross motor skill. So we set a goal for them and then strategies, and that's how I look at it at the end of the year.
Right. Thank you.
But Andy, in that, so you're saying that you might have kids, even though you're moving on to different units of study, especially in the younger grades where they're kind of like growing in their skill level. You might have kids working on a different thing than your current unit or your current unit of study. Like say if you move on 3rd grade, they're starting. Sorry, go ahead.
Just repeat the question.
So are you saying that you might have 2nd graders still working on a skill that you had that was in a unit or unit of study that you had done the previous year, while the rest of their classmates might be moving on to a completely new unit?
No, like we will move we have reporting twice a year, yeah? So on the report card itself, we have the objectives or what we have been working on, and then we give them that goal. And it's been a reporting system that has started at school about 2 years ago. So the idea is in all the subject areas they have a goal that they're working on. So a general goal in PE, but then there's actual, we give them feedback on the more specific skills that they're working on. So the idea is like a big goal related to PE, so that, and that big goal is very generic, right? So it doesn't necessarily apply to only movement composition or to striking and fielding. It's more the big ideas. And then we give them strategies to meet that goal.
Okay. Now, do you have...
And these goals come from, we construct these goals directly from the PSPE. So
Is that from the continuum?
PSPE
So
and
is
then
that
we look
from...
at the big, yeah.
That's from the continuum?
It's from the PSP.
And so you'll have your overall generic goals that the kids are working on, and then do you also incorporate the individual skills that they're working on into their report card? Like, is there a strand on your reporting for that as well?
Yes. So there's different things that they've been working on up until that point, and then we give them again I guess we would look at it as being the smaller smaller goals, and then we would give them the exceeding, meeting, sometimes meeting, or rarely meeting. It's usually never rarely meeting. And then we go with the general goal, the bigger kind of goal, which is more based on peer relations and effort and kind of that in that type of those types of areas, yeah. And then we give them the strategies to work on it. And this has been, again, like, we've been doing this for 2 years, and you know, I don't think it's the best way. It's the way that the school decided to do it, but I have seen progress in the big goals, you know, because the students are aware of the big goals more than those little kind of descriptors, more of the little goals. They're aware more of the big goals that they have to work on. And those are the big ideas that when they leave our program that we want them to be able to demonstrate and to know, you know, when they leave our program. So.
Have you got, for
That
example?
make sense?
Yeah, I got you.
Awesome. Have you got, say, for example, a couple of like what a generic goal would be for, say, a student in, say, grade 1? What would be your generic goal, like your big goal? Just an example of a couple.
Let me think. I would say grade 1, it would be, it might be something related to the ability to follow instruction, like, you know, just kind of follow instructions and routines in class. You know, grade 1, that is a tricky one too, because these are young kids, yeah?
Yeah.
So it might be the goal of showing better listening skills in class. And oftentimes it's goals that, you know, when you collaborate with the classroom teacher, it's similar things that they're working on in class, right? So you have these meetings with teachers, and my goal in PE, I don't base it on what the goal in the classroom is. But when we have our discussions, generally we can connect the dots.
Okay, so say for
So it could be, you know, being a better listener in class. These are the things you're going to do. You know, sit closer to the teacher. Maybe you're going to not remove yourself, but think about who you sit beside. Simple, but effective when done over the long term. So when you take a grade 1 kid, they know that their goal is to listen better. And you know, young kids have trouble listening. We already know this, but when you can continually work on that goal with them and remind them of the strategies, you see them doing it. And it just takes like, come on, what's the goal? What do you need to be working on? And then if they're sitting beside somebody that's distracting them, then it's like, oh, and they remember they got to move away from them. And you see over time that when you're consistent with it, it actually begins to work. But it didn't work in our first year. Last year was the first year we did it. This is our second year, and I'm starting to see progress with it right now. So I don't necessarily think it's the best way, but I think that it's just a, when done consistently over time, I'm beginning to see that it's working.
Thank you very much.
I'm going to have to do a quick timeout because my team just finished. I've got to get them, but I'm going to call back.
Okay, good.
Okay?
Okay, that's fine.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Sorry, kind of sorry, but I'll call back once I get them settled. They're going to get lunch and then we're going to head out, but I'll have a little more time, so I will call back in a few minutes, okay?
Okay, that's fine. Thank you.
Okay.
So his big goal is quite a generic goal, isn't it?
Yeah.
Very
It's a
generic.
very
like
generic. When he
massive.
said that, I was like, oh, I thought you meant like a specific subject goal, but to me,